Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Richard Kennedy do gu ingoa. No piri tana nui aho. And I'm afraid that's it. That's as good as... So I also understand that geographic roots and family tree are really important. So a very brief history. I was born in South Africa and have an Irish mother and a British father. And they were both brought up in Tanzania. And but I've lived in the UK and moved back from South Africa and lived in the UK since I was 8 years old. And I now live in Sussex with my wife and our 4 children. So there's a picture of us from a recent holiday. We love the mountains, so I feel at home here. As I've already been introduced, I am the chair of Social Value UK and the co-chair with Simon Favell, who some of you may know, of Social Value International. We're a membership organisation and actually a network of membership organisations which want to change the way the world accounts for value so that together we can maximise social impact. But I'll come on to that a little bit later. So, firstly, I'd just like to ask a few questions. So, who here believes that inequality is going to reduce over the next 5 years? Yeah. No? No one? I was going to heckle from the stage if someone did. So, for those of you that know, this is what the picture of inequality looks like today around the world. Unfortunately, it's also getting worse. It shows the differences in national income measured by what's called the national Gini coefficient. And the lighter yellow areas are more equal, while the red and darker areas show the areas of highest inequality. And New Zealand there you can see is a sort of orange. So relatively, you would think it's okay compared to the rest of the world. But as I'm sure you all know, and I've been doing a bit of research, inequality increased rapidly here during the 80s and 90s due to tax cuts for the top earners and a cut in social services for the poorest families. So unfortunately, there has been a sort of rapid increase in inequality in the 80s and 90s here, and as you can see at the end of that chart, it hasn't really improved since. And polling shows for the politicians in the room that New Zealanders have constantly or consistently rated inequality as the single biggest issue facing the country since 2014. Over 80% of the country say that they are concerned or very concerned about income and wealth imbalances. But what does inequality mean, and how does it present itself? For me, inequality is a corrosive force. It's like rust. Bigger income and wealth imbalances eat away at trust and empathy, making a country less healthy, less united, and we're seeing these signs fueling divisive politics, which is becoming more prevalent across the world today. Unequal societies are less functional, less cohesive, and less healthy than their more equal counterparts. Growing inequality creates and increases distrust, and it dissolves the bonds between people. This weakens our sense of each other's lives and our ability to pull together and tackle difficult problems. From a health perspective, more unequal societies are more materially competitive, more hierarchical, more stressful, and this leads to higher rates of stress-related illnesses. Around the world, higher inequality means that people's chances are more limited by who their parents were. In a society like the US, you can predict half of a person's income from what their parents earned, because huge inequality leads to such different starts for rich and poor children and the government doesn't offer much support for adults. Advantage and disadvantage, unfortunately, is therefore passed on from generation to generation. On a brighter side, in contrast, more equal societies like Denmark, all parents have enough income to buy their kids, for example, a computer before they go to school, and they're able to heat their homes properly, and strong public services to help those who are struggling a bit later on in life. People can therefore make their own way in life rather than being heavily influenced by their parents' status. New Zealand is probably somewhere between those two extremes, but probably becoming a little bit more like America. So here, some of you may have seen this before, is a very visual example from Sao Paulo. In Brazil, there is literally, you can see a line there that separates the exuberantly rich with their freshly laid tennis courts and their individual swimming pools, and the unbelievably poor people living on the other side of that wall in their crumbling 50-year-old shacks. Now, inequality is often hidden, but this is a real visual and obvious manifestation of inequality, and for me it's absolutely despicable. So back to the global picture. This chart, with data from Credit Suisse, shows how a share of global wealth has changed between the top 1% and the bottom 99% of the world. What's absolutely shocking is that in around 2015, the world's top 1% own or hold more assets than the rest of us put together. While the assumption is that development and growth is good for all, I think the Holy Father puts it best. The promise was that when the glass was full, it would overflow, benefiting the poor. But what happens instead is that when the glass is full, it magically gets bigger. Nothing ever comes out for the poor. So why are we in this situation? And this is my opinion, before any of your scholars in the room. So over the last couple of centuries, the advent of financial accounting and the growing consistency in how financial value is measured around the world has created a laser-like focus on financial returns. As trust in these measures increase, investment capital flowed to people and companies that excelled at creating financial returns. It soon became a legal requirement for companies to put shareholder returns above all other considerations, resulting in an exponential growth of gross domestic product. And this chart just shows how rapid that has been over the last, I guess, 100 or 200 years. So the people that own assets have been able to increase their wealth, while business executives running those organizations, the stewards of the capital, so to speak, are continually searching for ways to decrease costs, often labor, and increase margins, resulting in customers getting less for their money as it all funneled up to the asset owners. So for the lucky few that have a much higher income and wealth, does it make you happier? This pursuit of profit, this pursuit of wealth, does it make you happier? And the answer is it doesn't. Beyond a certain level, it doesn't significantly increase happiness and well-being. Clearly, there are regional differences, and here there's in each different region there's a different number that above that amount of income, happiness does not increase. So clearly, the system is broken. In addition to not improving well-being above a certain point, financial returns all too often, if not always, come with social and environmental costs which are not accounted for. So we need to start to measure a broader definition of value than just money itself. But let's not ignore what we can learn from the past and from, I guess, the growth in wealth and financial accounting. So what is good about financial accounting? How has it served us? It's driven inequality, but it has also driven a very, very high sense of accountability. It's given the investors the power to move their capital to where they think they can make the most returns. Conversely, as we start to think about measuring our impact, what's bad about the way we do that? I'd argue that there's a real lack of accountability. And we have the managers that run a business, and they normally report to their board, and the board report to their investors or their funders. But who do they report to? And how are the service users held? How do the service users hold the organisation to account? So our beneficiaries, unfortunately, in a lot of organisations, have little or no power. I'm very glad to see that that's not the case here. So what do we need in the future? Well, we think you need to change the way society accounts for value. We need to change financial accounting so that it reflects a much broader sense of our reality and the value that's created or destroyed through our activities. So a few more questions. Hopefully, I'll get more hands in the air this time. So who of you want to measure the social impact of what you're doing? Come on, everyone. Surely everyone. So how many of you actually do measure what you do? A few people brave enough? Yeah, good. Through measuring impact, how many of you actually change the way you deliver your products and services as a result of your findings? Well, I think, before the break we heard from Arawangi, and I'm blown away by how fantastic Waipera are at doing that. So I wholeheartedly congratulate you for that. But it is a rare thing, unfortunately, in our sector. Unfortunately, on the whole, we are not accountable to our stakeholders and our beneficiaries. For the private sector, while they are accountable to customers who can choose to purchase their products and services or not purchase them, if they don't like them or need them or want them, then they don't purchase them. And corporations, unfortunately, are not generally accountable to other stakeholders, such as staff or often the communities where they operate. So, again, a notable exception here is, and it's incredibly heartening to learn about Whina Ora, which is where the family is central to service, but generally, unfortunately, in the not-for-profit sector, we are not accountable to our stakeholders or beneficiaries. So hopefully we've, because I feel like I'm part of the family, have convinced you now that you should measure your impact. So why isn't everyone doing this? Unfortunately, having been as part of the evaluation industry myself, I think, we're supposedly independent, but I think we're also guilty of reinforcing an organisation's ability to maintain the status quo. And again, normally, not in the case of Waipera, the standard structure for not-for-profit boards encourages risk mitigation rather than impact maximisation. There are also many excuses for why we shouldn't measure impact. The one we hear all too often is it's too expensive. But how much, in your organisations, how much do you spend on financial accounting? And surely, if you're an impact-focused organization, you should spend at least as much, if not more, on your social accounting than you do on your financial accounting. The next excuse we often hear is, oh, there's so many ways, I don't know where to start. And actually, we're seeing that there's a lot of convergence at the moment. And our principles, which I'll come on to a little bit later, are an example of that. Another one is the Impact Management Project, which Social Value UK and Social Value International have been involved in for the last 2 years. And it's about to be extended for another 3 years. The Impact Management Project works with charities and social enterprises to define impact management rather than measurement, collecting data that can be used to help improve services and delivery for our beneficiaries. Final excuse is our data isn't good enough. And our argument is that any data is good as long as it comes from your beneficiaries, and that you analyze and use this to make changes to maximize your impact. I was lucky enough to run some training here last week for Social Value Aotearoa, where we spent the day unpicking this in detail to help organizations make a start at maximizing their impact. And we do that through asking the right questions, and most importantly, asking the right people. And SVA will be running this training again in the future, and they'll be in touch with those of you that are members. But these are all just excuses. The truth is, excuses are for people who don't want it bad enough. Imagine if someone made these excuses about financial accounting. It just wouldn't happen. People just, if you're in a startup business, Dragon's Den, traditional Dragon's Den, and you said, sorry, I don't know what my numbers are. It's too expensive for me to find out. There's too many ways to measure my financial performance. I can't be bothered. And my data's not good enough. What do you think the Dragons would do? They'd be straight out. So, in the words of Dr. Zeus, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get done. It's not. So, at Social Value International, we work with members to increase accounting, measuring and managing social value. We believe in a world where a broader definition of value will change decision-making and ultimately decrease inequality and environmental degradation. We have members and national networks from around the world, and we're constantly growing. It seems at the moment that every board meeting we're approving at least one new national network, and actually now it's starting to happen in between board meetings. And Social Value Aotearoa is New Zealand's national member, and they can hook you up into all that they're doing, all that we are doing, and they can provide you with guidance, support, and training. So, guiding us and our members are a set of principles, and Arawangi talked to them earlier. And these have been developed in collaboration with our global membership to guide anyone that is looking to measure and maximize social value. I've got a very short video now just to give you an overview of the principles. So there are some really good examples of where there is consistency with the use of our principles. So one here is the Social and Human Capital Protocol, which is a result of a collaboration with over 50 multinational organizations, and it provides a consistent guide for companies to measure and value their social capital. The Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes now have a criterion around materiality and impact measurement and evaluation. The EU company reporting guidelines now for larger companies requires them to disclose their non-financial outcomes. And also, I'm sure you're familiar with this, we're seeing now with the UN goals and others, we're starting to provide a bit of a taxonomy around outcomes, helping us to group them together and contribute in a more collective way. A really important emerging theme and trend and example of best practice is responsiveness to stakeholder needs. And the way Waipera are guided through their framework is one of the best examples in the world of an embedded system which focuses on stakeholders, collecting data from them, and then constantly responding to the changing needs of their beneficiaries. Social Value International recently assured TPM's Indigenous Social Value Whānau Ora accreditation framework, and this has responsiveness built into it. And it's the first framework of its kind globally, as I'm sure you know, is specifically focused on maximizing positive impact for the Maori community. So, how can you just get started? It's all a bit overwhelming and, incredible example of how to do it really, really well. Might be a bit overwhelming. So how can we just get started? My advice to you is to just start. Just simply start measuring something. Start small. And all that is just having a discussion with your stakeholders. For example, if you're running a drop-in training centre for young people, on the way out, you might just ask, did you feel welcome? And if they say, no, I didn't, and I'm never coming back, then it's pretty easy to make a change, to make them feel a bit more welcome, so that they come back and you have a better impact. Once you've started, ask your stakeholders or beneficiaries if they have any ideas about how to make the program or activity or service run better. And then make those changes and make it happen. It's as simple as that. At Social Value International, we have recently launched the Social Value Certificate as part of our assurance and accreditation services. Unsurprisingly, the social value principles are at the core of the certification. It looks at the systems and processes that you have in place for maximizing your social value. The Social Value Certificate has 3 levels, and applicants can progress through each level by producing evidence to Social Value International. The certificate proves to external stakeholders, including your funders, that you are aligning to an international standard for managing your social impact and taking steps towards maximizing the value that you can create for your beneficiaries. It also provides you with a clear pathway for improving the way you manage your social impact. If you want any help to get started on measuring or managing your social impact, please reach out to the very friendly and hospitable team at Social Value Aotearoa, and you'll find their stand just outside this room. So, back to Madiba, South Africa. As Nelson Mandela said, poverty, like inequality, is not an accident. Like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be equally removed by the actions of human beings. So why is this important to me? For me, a big driver is my kids. I want them to grow up in a sustainable world of increasing equality and social accountability and purpose. We are living during an extraordinarily important time. We've seen incredible industrial development and now technological and communication development. And we're using too much of our planet's resources. And through our economic system, we have been steadily increasing inequality. Now is the time to make urgent changes to the way we account for, measure, and manage a broader sense of value, so that we can safeguard our planet and influence the resource flows to empower and provide more equal opportunities for all. So let's work together in big ways, but also in small ways, while we still have the chance to protect, nourish, and improve our world and support our communities, so that our children and our children's children inherit a world that they can be proud of. Norera, tena koutou, tena tata katoa.